Hello again. I'm back with another clock. This one I found at a local thrift store. They were asking $15 for it, and it caught my eye because it looked very old. Initially, I did not know who the manufacturer was, but once I got it home and took a closer look, I saw some very small printing along the bottom of the dial here, which reads, manufactured by the Ingraham Company, Bristol, Connecticut. So it's an Ingraham. The Ingraham Company was founded by Elias Ingraham. He started making clocks in the 1840s, and I reached out to some clock people I know to try to find out exactly how old this one is. And what I heard back was that, and this individual has an Ingraham book, and he says he found this in it. The model is called the Princeton. Manufacturing began in 1905, and they stopped making it in 1916. That makes this clock anywhere from 108 to 119 years old. It definitely has some issues. The case for that old isn't in the worst shape. However, there's supposed to be a couple of columns, one here and here. This one is missing. And when I turn it around to the back, the piece of wood that covers the back is missing. And the springs here, I don't know if you can tell, but the one on the right is very rusted. And when I touch them, they're kind of oily, greasy. I don't know if I'm going to be able to open this up enough to clean it, or if this is going to have to be replaced. But at the very least, let me get it set up on my workbench, and I'll look to get the movement out of here and be able to take a closer look at it. And we'll see how it goes. This is the book I was referring to, Ingraham Clocks and Watches. It's interesting because it has photos or illustrations of hundreds of clocks that Ingraham manufactured over the years. And I was able to find this one in here. It's the Princeton. The date next to it says 1915, but from what I read, the dates next to all these clocks refers to whatever advertising brochure it was taken from. In other words, this was also being sold in 1915. Anyway, what I want to do first is remove the hands so I can get the movement out of the back of the clock. It looks as if a small nut is holding this on. I might even be able to use this to try to remove it. Hopefully it's not too tight. How about that? That wasn't bad for such an old clock. Oh, by the way, this is the pendulum that came out of the back of it. That's a bit snug. Let's see if I can remove it. Oh, there we go. Wow, not bad at all. Okay, let's turn it over. And what I'm seeing in here, just 4 screws holding it in. I'm going to proceed to loosen them up on my own. Once they're out, then I'll come back and remove the movement. Okay, the screws are removed. Let's see if I can lift this up. All right, well, I need to take a good long look at this. I'm also going to take a lot of photos because I know once I open this up, I need a record of exactly how these gears are positioned. So let's move the case aside. And give me some time to do my workup before I start to take it apart. One thing I forgot to mention was that I did hang the pendulum to see if the clock would run. It would go for just 2 minutes and then stop. But when I was taking my photos, I did notice something interesting and I wanted to show it to you. I have that little nut reattached to the stem that holds the minute hand. It's as if the minute hand is on there, and I'm going to rotate it and check out what happens. That's the half hour. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 o'clock. Let's go another one. There's the half hour. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's working. Rather remarkable. I can even see the spring here starting to get some separation. Another interesting thing that I noted, don't know if you can see it here, I'll try to show you. There is a date stamped on the clock. Kind of hard to see if you can, but what it says is 12:05, which means this movement was put together in December of 1905. Now that doesn't mean that the clock was assembled at that time. It might have sat for a while before everything was put together. But as far as I'm concerned, this clock is from 1905. Anyway, let me get it back onto my workbench and finish taking the rest of my photos and then figure out how I want to take it apart. What I'm going to try to do next, I want to let down the spring. To do that, you have to use what's called a letdown key. This is one. This particular one is too big for the arbor. It just spins. This other one I made, I have a slot in it. You can fit any size key that you want. And what you need to do is turn the spring a little bit in the winding direction, and then you have to push aside, lift up the click, which fits into the teeth on this gear here. Once that's out of the way, you ease up the tension on this, and it'll rapidly unwind the spring. You have to be careful. It's a lot of power in here. Hopefully everything doesn't go flying, but let's give it a try. I'm not sure how much of this you'll actually be able to see, but more important that I can see. Oh, it's starting to go. Let that work its way out. Well, let me unwind it some more. Oh, there we go. There we go. This spring is now let down all the way. How about that? This lets me get in here, try to clean this out, all the grease and dirt. Also put a thin layer of oil in here. I'm going to try to do the one on the other side as well. Although, I think what I'm going to do is try to clean this as best I can and lubricate it, wind it back up, and see what happens. I think it'll be easier to handle if I do one at a time rather than both together. I'm not going to have you watch me clean the whole thing. I flipped the movement over, but I just wanted you to see just how much dirt is in here. Just have a regular Q-tip dipped in oil, dipped in alcohol. And this was the first time I did. It just comes out black. So obviously this is going to take a good long time to clean both sides of this spring, but just want to give you an idea of what I'm dealing with here. Anyway, let me get to work. I finished cleaning and lubricating the spring. I used a very fine brush with a very thin coat of synthetic clock oil, just very lightly brushed both sides of the spring. And in theory, as the spring winds up upon itself, the fact that it's lubricated, it should slide instead of sticking. So hopefully that will get the spring working. Let me wind it up. Now, I'm not going to wind it up 100% of the way, but I think I can leave it like this for now. And let me get set up. I'll see if I can let down the other spring now. I can also mention that what cleans the springs quite well is using acetone. And there's enough acetone in nail polish remover to get the job done, and they came out really very clean. There's no residue on it at all. Anyway, let me get set up and try to let down the other spring. Try to zoom in a little for you. Whoop, there it's going. Oh God. All right. Now we get to clean this spring. Again, and it takes quite a while, believe me, so let me work on that. And when this is fully cleaned and lubricated and wound back up, then we'll continue. Okay, the spring is cleaned, it's lubricated and rewound, and I can say that this one was much cleaner than what I found here. And when I said this looked like it was a very rusty spring, it wasn't rust at all. It was just a lot of dirt. And now both of them are well cleaned and lubricated, and I think I'm not going to have any problem with the springs. I want to try to show you what I did next to it. Which was setting it up and hanging the pendulum on it just to see what would happen. And what I did was set it up on this block of wood, give the pendulum a go, and unfortunately it just went for about a minute or so before stopping. So that alone wasn't sufficient to get it working. And I'm not going to sit here for a minute watching this, but take my word, it stopped. Which means what I have to do next is assume that the gears in here were pretty much just as dirty as the springs. So I'm going to have to look to open it up. And I really don't know yet how I'm going to proceed with that. All I'm seeing so far, I'll try to show it, just 5 nuts holding this plate on. 1, 2, 3, 4 actually. 1, 2, yeah, 5. And taking it apart, I haven't figured quite how I'm going to handle that. For example, this hammer here, it seems to be wrapped with a metal wire holding it in position. and I can't see how I'm going to be able to lift this plate up with this in the way. I don't think it's going to come with it. I really don't know. One thing I did notice is if you have read any books on how to fix these clocks or watched any videos, they will often talk about having worn bushings. And what that is the bushing is sort of a metal insert that goes into the plate, and then the pivot of the gear goes into that. And I'll show you what one looks like here. It's these little round inserts here. And they talk about these will get out of round, which means when the pivot is rotating back and forth for such a long time, it, instead of it being a circle, it wears it out in sort of like an elongated shape. And what I've discovered is because of the back and forth here, this particular gear is out of round. I don't know if you can see it or not, but the one, let me try to push it, you can see it. But this wobbles frontwards and backwards, to the left and to the right, if you can see that. And something like that, they'll say you have to put a new bushing in here. Now, I do not have the tools or even the knowledge to know how you go about removing a bushing in one of these plates and then putting in a new one. So even if I can take this apart and clean it well and get it back together, that alone might be enough to keep this clock from running. But I'm going to proceed by undoing these 4 nuts and looking to lift the plate off. What I think I'm going to do before that is let each spring down just a little bit. I don't want to have too much tension in it when I go to lift this off because I really don't know what's going to happen. So let me get to work on all that. Okay, I ended up letting the springs down all the way. I looked up some information on taking these apart, and one thing it said was to let the springs down. So I don't want to have any excess tension in here. I'll remove the nuts in question here. Now, what I'm going to have to do on my own is just very slowly and gently start to lift this up, because I really don't know if anything's going to pop off or what, and I have to take my time with this one. And once I get this removed, then I'll continue. Okay, I've removed the plate, lifted up a bit, and I think it's actually going to come off without much difficulty. Trying to avoid disturbing this hammer here. Okay, before I touch anything, I'm going to take photos of this arrangement here. This is quite the setup, isn't it? Anyway, let me work on that, and then I will come back. Okay, I've taken a few photos of this. What I have to do next is start by removing one gear, one piece at a time, and then taking a photo, as well as taking a photo of the gear itself, so I know, for example, you know, which way it goes in, this way or that way, that kind of a thing. So anyway, again, got my work cut out for me here. So once I think I know what I'm doing, I'll continue. Just wanted to show my progress so far. Removed this gear, these levers, as well as one of the mainsprings. Going to work on these gears and that spring next. I've done quite a bit. I'll try to point it all out. Because I was able to remove the mainsprings completely from the plate, that allowed me to do additional cleaning in the areas that were not accessible when they were sitting on the gears here. The other thing I was able to do, I removed almost every gear from the plate, and to keep it in in orderly fashion, I popped them into a piece of cardboard in the order that I removed them. And that way I will have a pretty good idea, I hope, of when I go to reassemble all of it. And I'll be able to clean them up in just little batches so as not to mix them up, along with all the photos I took of them. I think I know where they go. This gear here, I found that there's a clip holding it, and I was able to pry that off. So this one comes off. And on the other side here, let me put this clip away. This particular gear is sort of locked in, and the escape lever, I'm not sure what they call it, but that is blocking it. To remove this, I would have to remove this whole part here. There's a spring that's holding it in. It's pretty involved. I don't want to start bending out springs. I really believe with a toothbrush, a little bit of alcohol, I can get in here and clean it out pretty well. So the next step for me is to just give everything a real good cleaning, and then I'll be ready to start reassembly. Everything has been cleaned, the plates, the gears, the various parts. All I have left to do now is to lubricate the pivots on the gears. To do that, I use what are known as oil pins with some synthetic clock oil, just a tiny little bit at the end of the pivot, as well as within the bushing that it's going to fit into. And then I get to reassemble everything. That's going to take a really long time. I don't know how much of it I'll be able to show you. I'll try to set up maybe a handful of gears and just show you the stages that I get to as far as putting it together. I don't want it to be where I suddenly come back and everything is fully reassembled, so I'll show as much as I can. What I'm doing is looking through all the photos I took of the disassembly so I can figure out which parts go in first. And what I have so far, and I'll zoom in a little, I'll probably be zooming in and out throughout this. This was the center post that holds the hands. That fits here. This gear, which controlled the hammer, giving the hours of the time. A little clip held this in. Okay, let me zoom out a bit. Next I have this one here. Followed by this. And this. So far, so good. Next comes the springs. This will take a bit of maneuvering, so let me work on this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time having you watch me just manipulate it, so we'll continue once it's down. I realized two things. One is I couldn't put this spring on yet because I'm still missing some gears here, but I put this one on, and the other thing is that I really can't show you how I position this. I have to lift it up and manipulate it so I can see what I'm doing, and I can't get all that on camera. But for the 3 gears that have to go here before I put this spring on, I have this one and this one. Oh, get back in there. Okay, now I can position this. Don't know if I'll be able to show any of it, but we'll try. Not too bad. All right, the springs are on. Next, I have to manipulate these parts and the hammers. Let me work on that a bit, and then I'll continue. I had to swap out a different way to support this. What goes on next, and I'll zoom in. Here's one. And two. Then this one fits here. And the last piece, the fan. Okay, it is completely assembled. What I have to do next is position the plate and then start to tease all the pivots into the various bushings. So let me get to work on that. I have to reattach the bell. And we'll see how easy it is to slide this up here. Okay, so this is sort of how it has to sit. I have to tease the pivots of the arbors of the springs into here, where the nuts are going to fit over these screw posts. And it's a slow, careful process, and I'm going to have to work on that on my own, and I'll try to stop and show you the progress that I'm making with it. I was able to slide the arbor into the plate here and the post, and what I'm going to do next is just seat one of the nuts just a little bit, so as I maneuver the rest of it, it doesn't pop off. Now let's see if I can get this arbor in. There it is. Let's get the other nut on. Come on. Okay. I had to place it on this piece of wood so I could easily rotate it in order to view it from the different angles. I have to be able to see how the pivots are going to get inserted into the bushings. When I said that it was a slow, tedious process, it was an understatement. It's going to take a very long time to get this lined up properly. So I'm going to go ahead and work on it, and when everything is together, then I'll continue. I'll show you what I set up, because it might be a helpful tip if you're trying to do this yourself, but I needed to raise the whole mechanism up onto a platform so that I'm able to look directly into it as I'm teasing the various pivots into the bushings. You just can't do all that kind of work strictly from viewing it from above. So it's, again, a slow process, but it's getting there. And one thing you want to do is work your way from the back towards the front, getting it lower and lower. And each time you try to press one of the gears into its proper position. If it feels too tight, just loosen up a half turn on the nut, raise it up a little bit, and then proceed from there. Everything is back in place. I think it's where it's supposed to be. And what I want to try to do next is see if I can wind up the springs. There's one. Yeah, looks like it's working. At least that's the chime one. Oh, something felt loose there. Let's try the other one. Well, what I'm going to look to do next, set it back up on that block of wood like I had before. I'll hang the pendulum and see if it runs. So give me a few moments to do that. Also, let's reattach the belt. Okay. Well, I'm a little disappointed to say that the clock is still not running. I'll let you take a look at it. It goes for about a minute or so and then stops. And I took a good long look at the movement to try to figure out why. And the one thing I noticed when I spoke about that one bushing is the gear right in the center here. Oh, there it is. As it's going, it'll all of a sudden pop up. You can see the play in it. And when it pops up, that causes it to stop. And it's really the only one bushing that I could find. And as I did not have the wherewithal to replace a bushing, I'm probably just going to pop this back into the case and put it up on a shelf. So let me get to work on that. There you have it. It's an Ingraham 8-day mantel clock. I don't normally post videos of clocks that I can't repair, but I have done a couple. But this one, the fact that it was from 1905 makes it over 118 years old. It's the oldest clock that I've come across. And I'm hoping that some of the things I showed might prove helpful if you're trying to repair one of these yourself. Things such as how to find a worn bushing, making sure you take plenty of photos so you can see everything from every angle, setting up the gears upon removal so you know what order to put them back, and most important, how to guide the pivots carefully into the plates so that you're not bending them. And that pretty much wraps things up. Oh wait, one last thing. Bye for now.